it's kind of sad because even though I fit this mold and I accepted that men are better than women, like that's what we're told growing up, that men are better. They're smarter, they're more capable. I still wanted to challenge that always. And I wanted to challenge that more than most of my friends did, I would say. And that's what really also set me apart too. Because I had friends who'd be like, oh yeah, I think I'd be an incredible lawyer when I'm older, but I'm not going to do that because I can't do that because I have to raise my kids. And those will be conversations I had. Or like one of my friends would be like, yeah, like it sucks that men are smarter, but that's just what it is. And it was kind of like this acceptance that people had that I was just like, no, I don't want to accept this. Like this doesn't make sense to me. Like maybe it's just something that I just can't understand.
It's a whole bad bitch philosophy. It's a way of being, right? It's just being unapologetic, taking up space, commanding your worth, not backing down, calling out bullshit, just like doing your life on your own terms. I'm Lisa Carmen Wang, and I'm the founder of the Bad Bitch Empire. Welcome back, Bad Bitches. Today I'm here with Miriam Haart. She currently stars in the top 10 hit series My Unorthodox Life on Netflix, about how she and her family broke free from an ultra-orthodox community and how she created life on her own terms. She just graduated from Stanford University with a degree in computer science and is the youngest professor at Stanford on virtual reality. Miriam has built over 10 iOS apps and currently develops NFTs, including ones that fund pro-choice movements. Today, we're talking about letting go of shame to become your authentic self, sexually, professionally, and financially. Embracing uncertainty and overcoming yourself and your own limiting beliefs. Miriam, welcome to the Bad Bitch Empire.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FTX US, the most complete crypto and finance app to buy and sell crypto with up to 85% lower fees than top competitors. You can trade NFTs with no fees, track your entire portfolio, and use a crypto-friendly debit card at millions of retailers. Plus, they're even launching stocks. Download the FTX US app by going to the link in the description and using the code BADBITCHES to earn free crypto on every trade over $10. Again, link in the description. Use code BADBITCHES to sign up so we can start investing and break the crypto boys club. All right, back to today's episode. So to start, I'm so curious about your childhood and the community that you grew up in. So take us back and talk about the good girl brainwashing that you experienced and how you really broke free of that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So I would say that it kind of happened even though I didn't want it to be happening, where I was just this major bundle of energy, sports lover child who just was super messy. I would eat 3 hot dogs and get ketchup all over my shirt. And my teacher would call my mom and say that she eats too messily and that needs to be controlled. So I was just this person who just didn't fit in always, kind of. And that was just because I was a girl. I was a woman. So in my community, the community is very segregated based on gender. And so men have a role and women have a role. And the role of a woman is pretty much just to be a good housewife and a good mother. And that's all that matters. And for men, it's to be a good learner and to take care of the family financially and to usually become a rabbi. But they have more liberty to just be free more than women do. And so me being in the girl group of things, it just wasn't good for me. I was always just not fitting in. I was kind of the weird kid growing up. I would just come to school with a football and wear sneakers, and wearing sneakers was deemed very weird and inappropriate. Most girls wore flats as shoes.
And were you punished at all for these things or disciplined in any way?
So for those social norm things, I technically still followed the rules because I was still wearing the skirts and covering my collarbone and covering my elbows. And so I wasn't ever punished like that. But just in terms of the social norm of what it means to be a girl, I did not fit that at all. Yeah. And then the rest of the rules I followed because I genuinely believed in the religion. So I didn't want to fight those.
What were some of those rules?
Some of those rules were singing, for example. I wasn't allowed to sing in front of men. And so I loved to sing as a kid. I still do love singing. And I remember there was constant debates in my family when I had my uncles over that I can't be singing by the Shabbos table. Because every Saturday we had a Shabbat meal. And during the meal there's something called Zemiros where everybody just sings. And I would sing, but then once I hit the age of 12, that's when a girl like goes through her bat mitzvah and is now an adult. They're like, she can no longer sing at the Shabbos table. And so it's like those kinds of things I had to stop singing after that, where I was limited by the rules themselves. But even playing sports, I had nobody to play with. There was I remember when I was 10 years old crying, banging my hands on the floor because all I wanted to do was play basketball and baseball. And my mom was like, I'm so sorry, there's no camp for me to send you to where girls can play those sports. It doesn't exist. And so those were the kind of limitations I faced. And I definitely accepted that I'm different because I just never wanted the things that other girls wanted, but also still at the end of the day followed in the mold and wore clothes where I covered my bodies, didn't sing, didn't play sports until I went to a more modern school, things like that.
Okay. And then what about education? Because you said men are the ones who are supposed to be out there learning.
Yeah.
Like how were you treated?
Yeah. So I would say my education, it was very rigorous, but in the wrong study. So it was from pretty much school started at 7 a.m., ended at like around 5:30 p.m. So it was a long school day, and I commuted, so it took up my entire day. But majority of my studies were Hebrew studies. And so I learned Jewish law and Jewish history and the Chumash, which is like the Old Testament, and Navi, which is like the story of the prophets. And so I had all of these classes about Jewish studies, and then they threw in global history, they threw in math, they threw in science, but we really only studied what we need to study to pass the New York State Regent, and that was it. And even if you failed, it's like, okay, it's not a big deal. And I remember during those classes, I would spend time in the outside just like playing with my basketball, and I didn't learn really how to write an essay ever. I never took trigonometry. Yeah.
And what did people, when you said you were disrupting these social norms and you were just like, this doesn't feel like me, I mean, that also takes a lot of, I think, mental strength to be like, I don't care and I'm just going to do me. So like, what was your just internal narrative like as people were telling you that there was something different or wrong with you?
Yeah. It was a little confused and mixed, the narrative in my head, because one part of it was I feel worse pretending, like when I wore the dresses that other people wore, I didn't feel good in them. Like I just didn't. It wasn't me. It wasn't I had this thing called the split test. And so if I would go shopping with my mom, if I wore a dress, I would have to be able to do a split in it. And if I couldn't do a split in it, then I just refused to get it, or like I wouldn't let her buy it. And so I think it was just because to me there's two options. One was to fit in and just like live that life and have everybody will be friends with me. I'll be considered normal. That would be amazing. I'd be popular maybe, And the other narrative is to just be myself and then just live my truth, and which one makes me feel better. And I found that even though being myself was lonely at times or discomforting at times, I still did feel better than not living my truth and being myself.
And what would you say the other girls, what was their dream?
So I remember it's kind of sad because even though I fit this mold and I accepted that men are better than women, like that's what we're told growing up, that men are better. They're smarter, they're more capable. I still wanted to challenge that always. And I wanted to challenge that more than most of my friends did, I would say. And that's what really also set me apart too. Because I had friends who'd be like, oh yeah, I think I'd be an incredible lawyer when I'm older, but I'm not going to do that because I can't do that because I have to raise my kids. And those will be conversations I had. Or like one of my friends would be like, yeah, like it sucks that men are smarter, but that's just what it is. And it was kind of like this acceptance that people had that I was just like, no, I don't want to accept this. Like this doesn't make sense to me. Like maybe it's just something that I just can't understand, but I really want to. And I would challenge my teachers and try to understand, and I would always just get nowhere.
What were the teachers' responses to that?
So one particular thing I would always ask was about the skirts, because that really bothered me. Why can't women wear pants? That one I really despised. And it would always just be like, well, there's these modesty rules, and then they would try to explain it, or they would say I'm too young to understand the full length of how it works, and then they'd say you have to ask this rabbi, and then I would ask that rabbi, and then he would refer me to these texts, and it was all kind of very misconstrued and ambiguous, and I never really got a concrete answer. But as I got older, I was able to do that research myself, and I was able to find those answers. And the answers came from rabbis like Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who's this rabbi in the 1500s around, who pretty much says the length that the skirt has to be, and the length, how much like inches over the elbow the shirt has to be, like those like the nitty-gritty rules of things. But that wasn't really an answer to me. That was like some dude 500 years ago who came up with these things, right? But I was at that point I was already like questioning the religion, so
Yeah. And I mean, that pretty much just goes to, I always think about when you try to induce, it's like physical and sexual shame of women, that's just an attempt to like control and diminish women.
Oh, yeah.
And at what point did you really put two and two together where you're like, wait a minute, just because some dude 500 years ago said something, like I need to adhere to this, and then you were like, wait, I need to somehow get out. Like, what's the connection there?
Yeah, so that can be a whole like 7-hour long conversation about how I broke out of the mindset of the religion, because I was completely brainwashed. I genuinely thought that ripping like a sugar packet open on a Saturday was breaking a moral law. Like it was wrong. You know, it's like stealing. Like that, I felt that. And that's brainwashing. You know, like now looking back, the things that I felt guilty about is just so crazy to me. Like ripping grass or breaking a branch on a tree. Like those were forbidden, you know, on certain days.
By everyone?
For everybody, yeah. But I would say the way that I did break out and the way that it happened was because of my mom. When she was 42 around, she hit a point where she was either going to commit suicide or leave the community. And so luckily she chose leaving the community. And that was the first time for me to be ever exposed to somebody that wasn't within this ultra-orthodox community and somebody that I like love and respect.
So
also.
she was obviously she was in the community and she was like feeling suffocated.
Yes. And then she just left. She was done, and she kind of took me with her and told me her ideas about things and started a shoe company and started traveling around the world and making that a reality, and just making money for herself and being successful. And her story is really fascinating too. And when I was 16 years old, she took me with her to Paris, and that was the first time I ever left the country. And she had a conversation with me about how she was able to really trust that what she's doing is okay. And she only told me that once I asked. So up until that point, so she left when I was 13, but I never really accepted who she was or what she was doing because I had a whole lifetime of other like ideas that were true.
So you thought she was being sinful.
I did, but also I didn't want to, because to me she was like the most pure person ever. She's my role model to this day, you know? And so it was just something I had to like grapple in my mind. How can this good person be doing something so wrong?
And she had hid her, I guess, discontent
Yes.
most of her life?
Yeah. It was a complete surprise to like pretty much everybody in my family. Maybe not my dad, I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, it was. She was a great mom, and I had a great childhood, like in terms of like the family, you know. And I had no idea that she was unhappy.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow. And how was the reaction of your dad
On me not being religious?
on your mom leaving?
Yeah. Well, it's actually really beautiful, the story there, because they always prioritized us. And so my mom would come back every weekend and just be with the family for Shabbos. And my dad, like even today, they're really good friends right now. My dad's remarried, and we always do like family holidays together and everything like that. My dad's been super supportive, like of everybody. Yeah. And because there was an arranged marriage for them, you know, like my mom got married at 19. She never went to college. She got a perfect score on her SAT and got a full ride to Columbia, but wasn't able to go because she was a girl. And so it's like a sad story, you know, but then at the end of the day, it all worked out, I guess.
Yeah. And so how did she actually break free? And even, well, to the point of like financially, right? How was she able to become financially independent and start a whole shoe company?
Yeah. So that's also another super long story, but she just wrote a book called Brazen.
Okay.
And it was just released a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And so read the book. It's all there. Her whole story is there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. So now you guys have left the community. So if we finish summarizing, first of all, like how you broke free of the brainwashing, like, because I actually think this is really, really important to dig into, because there's always this awakening moment where you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
is this really true, right? Are the things that I've been taught growing up that I didn't even think to question, like, is that my truth? And then the next part is actually acting upon that and saying, okay, I'm going to reject this truth, and then I'm going to do something completely different with my life. That is a big risk because I know I'm going to be excommunicated or like, criticized by the people in my like immediate circle.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get into it. So to the first question.
Yeah.
The thing that really pushed me to like question the religion itself, I would say, is when I was in Paris, we were at some restaurant and I was eating probably lettuce, like maybe a potato, like something a vegetable of some sort, because that was all that I can eat, because that was the only thing that was kosher. Because when you're ultra-orthodox, there's so many rules as to restrict people into what they can eat in the community. So I can't eat from a fork and knife that hasn't been blessed in rainwater, So that limits me to go to any restaurant that isn't a kosher restaurant. I can't drink wine that's touched by a non-Jewish person. And so there's like so many rules that just limit you from eating at any restaurant. And so my mom, we went to, what did we go to? We went to, it's like melted cheese in the middle of the table. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Raclette.
Yeah,
I went to raclette. And so I wasn't eating anything really. And she was like having ham and cheese together. And I was just like that, to me, that was just the combination of all thing evil and wrong in this world. And then also being in Paris and like looking outside and I just see so many people walking the streets, I realized how small my community was and how big the world is. And the combination of realizing that my life isn't the world and seeing such a good person doing something that was to me so wrong, I just hit a point where I was like, okay, why is what you're doing okay? Like, how are you not a bad person by doing this? Can you explain that to me? And she explained to me the adjacent possible. I'm not sure if you know what that is. It made sense to me. I'm not sure if this will be inspirational to the people listening right now, but should I go into it or should we just? Sure. Okay. But really quickly, it's this concept by Stephen Johnson. He was a philosopher. And the adjacent possible is this idea, and to explain, I can give an example. So the electricity, photography couldn't have been invented until electricity was invented, right? And so there's a step to innovation that exists. And so if, let's say in the 1800s, somebody had an idea of creating a television, they would, if let's say you said that to me, I'd be like, you're crazy, that's not possible, But after electricity is invented and then photography and then videography, then if you came to me with the idea of creating a television, it would have been adjacently possible to innovate, to create. So that's the adjacent possible.
Got it.
And so she applied that concept to religion and said to me that pretty much, let's say, because I learned that Moses, he pretty much was like the first leader of the Jewish people. And he went up to the heavens for 40 days and 40 nights, spoke to God, came back down, and then wrote the Old Testament. And that's what we learned. That's when we got our Old Testament. That's the story we have. So my mom says to me, let's say Moses does go up to the heavens and comes back down. What if, instead of him writing down the words of God, what if he just wrote, when he spoke to God, he just had the concepts of what it meant to be a good person, what it meant to eat healthy foods, like what it meant to just respect your parents and just not kill, not steal. And he applied those concepts of what it means to be good to that time. And that's why it says a man shouldn't sleep with another man, because that wouldn't be a reproductive relationship. And that's why it said these things. So it didn't make sense at that time, was pretty much what she was saying to me. And it kind of made sense, that the Old Testament was written for that time period. And maybe even some of the ideas were innovative. Like in the Old Testament, it says that women can own property. For that time, 5,000 years ago, that's pretty innovative. Women really weren't owning property then, But at the same time, it's just adjacently possible. The Old Testament doesn't go beyond that. Doesn't go beyond the innovation for that time. It sticks to, to the rules and regulations then.
Yep.
And so that's what she said to me. And that's how she said, that was one of the reasons she was able to break out of the religion, understanding that. And after hearing her say that, I was like, well, shit, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that was the first time I decided to question. And then after that, it was months of me reading these books from rabbis from the 1500s and understanding what rules are from the rabbis and what rules are actually from God. And it's called Mida Durabanan and Mida Duraita. And Orthodox Jews follow both of them, rules from rabbis and rules from God. And so I was like, I'll just follow the God rules because the rabbi rules, they're add-ons. I don't need to do that. And I realized that it's not that easy to separate the two, and they're all kind of intertwined. And so my fuck it moment was when I ditched school one day, came to New York City because my mom was here. I saw her. I walked to a Burger King, the closest Burger King to where I was. It was in a subway station. It was super sketchy. Went in there, I bought a burger with french fries, a cheeseburger. And to me, like, being in a Burger King we learned in school, you don't go into Burger Kings or McDonald's or anything like that unless you're dying and you need water. Like, to us, it was just all things wrong about America, and it was like hell. It was like a dangerous place. So I went in there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is scary.
Yeah.
And I bought the burger. I took a photo of it. I took one bite of the cheeseburger, and then I just, like, sat there for a couple minutes, threw it out, and walked away. And that was, like, my symbolic fuck it moment. I don't believe in this anymore. I'm going to live my life and live my truth.
It's amazing. I mean, it really, when you think about innovation on culture and just these religious texts, right, where you think about, like, the even founding fathers of our countries and, like, the Constitution and how it still says the right for men, right? All men are created equal. And it's like, how are we having so much technological innovation and we just are still abiding by these texts that literally no one has updated to suit the times?
Yeah.
And it's just, that's probably why we're still, like, taking these words from these old, really outdated men to try and dictate something that, like, at a time where women actually have very, very different rights and perspectives and freedoms.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've eaten your burger.
Yeah.
You've broken free. What happened next? Obviously you just graduated from Stanford, right? So how do you go from ultra-orthodox community to getting to a point where you're like, actually, I'm going to go to Stanford?
Yeah. So I think it's a whole crazy story.
Yeah.
But pretty much, I did not think I was going to go to Stanford. That was never really my plan, at first at least. My plan was to do what I love. And at that time, at age 16, what I loved was making apps. That was, like, my passion. I loved coding.
You already knew how to code?
So it's a story for that too. But the short story of that is that when I was 13, in my ultra-religious community, I decided I wanted to create an app for my school at Terrace. And so I just YouTubed, and my best friend at the time, besides, like, 2 girls in my school, was YouTube. I loved YouTube. So I spent my afternoons typing in on YouTube, how to, hitting the space bar, typing the letter A and seeing what comes up, typing letter B, breakdancing came up, and I was like, cool. Mm-hmm. And then I would just watch videos on how to do, like, the helicopter and learn how to do different breakdance moves. That's how I learned how to play guitar. I did origami for a really long time, watermelon art, like, just the randomest things. I just wanted to be learning, you know? And so for me, when I wanted to make an app, I just typed it on YouTube like I did for every other thing, how to make an app. And I think this was an advantage that my mom likes to talk about, where coming from the community, we had so much ignorance that we didn't realize that challenges we were taking on were so complex and so difficult. And so we went into it anyways. And so for me, creating an app, it was just like doing origami. I didn't even know what coding was. Like, that's how clueless I was. And so I just typed that in and watched the first video and got started. Downloaded Xcode, which is like the SDK that the first tutorial said you need to download, you know. Did my hello world. I still didn't know how to code, but I was just following along the tutorial. It was telling me exactly what to do. And I just YouTubed how to add a button in an app, how to add text, how to create, like, a table view, how to. And, like, I would have my friends over. I would close one eye, they would close another. We would hit the run button and hope that the code worked, because I didn't understand the code I was writing. I was just playing with it, editing it, you know. And after 6 months, I built my first app. So I built a complete app without understanding a line of code. So, like, people talk about imposter syndrome. I literally lived it because I didn't know how to code, and, like, I made an app. And after that, I guess just being a teenager, I stopped coding because it wasn't cool, especially as a girl.
Yeah.
And then once I had my fucking moment when I was 16, I was, at that point, like cooler. I hit puberty and I was prettier, you know, and like I had cooler friends in my school. I switched to a more modern school, and so my skirts were allowed to be a little shorter, and things like that. But then once I stopped being religious, I was like, this is not me. This is not what I want. I want to continue building apps. That's what I actually really like to do, even though I didn't do it since I was 13.
Yeah.
And so I applied to this program called Make School in San Francisco. And you had to have known how to code by then, but I just did the same bullshit thing that I did before and said, oh yeah, I've taken classes, I know how to do this. And then I got in. And so I went that summer. It was a summer camp. And after being in San Francisco in the summer, no longer religious, that was my first time meeting people that were outside of my community, like talking, being friends with guys, and just all of it, having friends with people who are Christian, you know, or just like different ethnicities. Just all of it was like the first for me. Wearing pants in public, things like that. And then I just never left. I stayed. I was going to 12th grade at the time. I wasn't even done high school yet, but I didn't want to leave. I couldn't leave. I just finally found freedom in San Francisco. I was amongst people who taught me what the growth mindset was and lived it. And I was like, this is so cool. Anybody believes that you can do anything. I believe that too. And so it was like I felt like I finally found my people, and I just couldn't leave. I just physically couldn't, and so I stayed, and I did their college program there.
Got it. So what's interesting about the initial part when you were learning how to code is that it's almost like there was a point of ignorance, right? In that, like, you hadn't been brainwashed by society being like, this is hard, girls don't do this, they're like, STEM is not a thing that women do, and it's like, it's basically this whole narrative of like, this is not for you and it's really hard. So you just went into it being like, well, I guess it's just like just another puzzle to do, and like I like building things. So that was really interesting. And then also I think just this idea of like tasting freedom for the first time. It's like a lot of times, like when we're trapped in like the brainwashing that we don't even know that we're in, you don't realize what you're missing until you actually see the other side of it. And so it's like intellectual exercises aren't going to do that. It's like you physically have to like speak with people who are different and then be willing to accept it, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And it took a long time too. Like it was a secret I kept from the people I met there. I didn't want them to know that I was this girl from this fundamentalist community. You know, it was something that I was very embarrassed about for a long time until I've come to terms with it, and now I embrace it. You know, it's a part of my story.
And what do the people from your community think about you now and your family, and also the fact that you guys are being documented on Netflix and talking about this?
Yeah. So I would say it's very mixed reviews. But for the most part, even though like Jewish, like very religious media outlets are saying negative things about us because we're kind of exposing them, we get DMs, like me and my mom and my family get DMs all the time from so many people just saying thank you. Like especially women, queer men too in the community. Like being gay is just not a thing in the community at all. And so everybody suffers from that. And so like queer people and women always DM and say like, thank you so much. You've inspired me to leave, you know, you've inspired me to follow whatever career I want to follow even within the community and things like that. So I'm so happy that even though the media isn't promoting us, that people feel good about what we've done.
Yeah.
I would say.
And do you think you've impacted anyone to break free themselves?
Oh, 100%. I've gotten so many messages from people saying that. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it must feel really impactful, like really good to know that just by living your truth, you are empowering other people to live their truth as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably for you too.
Yeah. 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 I think that all the time. It's like every once in a while you get like the haters, right? The people who are just not comfortable with powerful, independent, like financially free women, and they'll try to degrade you or like point out things that are inappropriate according to their perspectives. And then you get the woman who's like, oh, thank you so much for like you going to the edge gives me permission to take a baby step and like break free of my own trap. So how did you get into Stanford then? Right? Like, I think you told me previously, like your mom basically was like, okay, it's either this or nothing, right?
Yeah. So pretty much I wanted to go to Make School, the college program. You had to have been a high school graduate to go. But I told them I was 18, and then they accepted me because I was good. I was a good app developer. I was a good student there. And then once they accepted me, I told them that I was actually 16, and they're like, okay, fine, as long as you can. And I was actually, the way it happened, I was outed by my mom because she came down to San Francisco and she's like, you better take care of my daughter. She's only 16. And they're like, what? So I was like, why'd you say that?
Yeah.
But they were fine with it. It was a very small school. It was only their second year ever of being open too, so they're super new. And they just said to me, as long as you can figure out a way to graduate high school while you're here, then it's okay. And my mom said to me, because my mom wanted me to go to Stanford since I was like a sophomore in high school. I remember she said that. She's like, you're going to Stanford. I heard that that's the best college. You're going there.
Even before she had broken free?
So she was already broke. I was 15. So at that time,
see.
she already broke free.
Okay.
But I was still religious at the time. And like in the community and all of it. And I was a B, like I couldn't do that. You know, I got mad at her when she said that to me. I was like, what are you saying? I go to this school. I don't know anything. I have a terrible education. How do you expect me to go to Stanford? They're not going to accept me. Stop saying that. I got frustrated when she said that to me. But I knew that's what she wanted. And so when I was doing May school, well, when I wanted to do the college, I said to her, I'll figure out how to get into Stanford if you let me drop out of high school and go to this product college program that isn't accredited. And she said, okay. That was our agreement. So she supported me in San Francisco, and at the same time, I had to study to figure out a way to get into Stanford and graduate college, high school as well. So doing all those things. And so, yeah, I guess I studied for my ACTs, and the first score I got was like a 19. And I'm not sure like if you know how the scores on ACTs, like the best you can get is a 36, and I got like I think below the national average, which is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Yeah. The national it's not that good, the average, you know. And so I just didn't know grammar. I genuinely did not know what a preposition was, you know. And so I spent every day 2 hours just studying. I wore a baseball cap when I was studying because it was less distracting seeing the things on my desk. And I just like head down, just studied. I took online courses. And then I met this professor at Stanford at Make Schools, one of their like launch days. And I heard somebody told me that there's a Stanford person here. And I was like, oh, who, where? And I quickly got introduced, or I walked up myself, and I just created this connection with this professor and said, I'm an app developer, I'm a website developer, I can build things for you, and ended up making apps for this person. And then they connected me to other people and just doing literally just free work for all these people, because then I knew that they would help me get into the school, which they did, and they all wrote me letter of recommendations. So I had my recs down. I had my scores down after 2 years of studying. So I took 2 years off to study, and then I got in.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So do you feel like you reverse engineer, like you're like, here's the outcome. I want to go to Stanford. And then you figure out all the steps that you need to take? Or like how would you break down the way that your mind works in terms of like accomplishing the next big thing?
Yeah, I would say that at first I have to convince myself I can do it. That's step one. That's the hardest step, I would say. For getting into Stanford, that's definitely one of the hardest things I've done in my entire life, because I came from I didn't know anything, you know. It was so hard for me to build those scores up. And so getting that belief in myself wasn't there at first. And I was lucky because my mom believed in me. So at least I had like somebody saying, no, you can do it. But it still didn't sit in my heart. And it was only going to happen once it sat in my heart. And the way that I made that happen for myself is I have these strategies that I do to convince myself. First, I have to decide that I want to convince myself that I can do this, because I think that's like step one, the decision of like, okay, there's no other option. Even though you don't believe in yourself right now, you have to decide that you will believe in yourself. So that's step one. And so I made that decision. Like, I decided that my goal is to do it. Even though I didn't believe in myself, I decided I'm going to make myself believe in myself. And so then I remember I just had this like really long conversation with my mom after just a lot of thought, maybe a couple months of just thinking about whether this is something I actually wanted to do. Once I got more towards the idea of maybe, I do want to do Stanford, I had a conversation with my mom, like, why do I want to do this again? Why do you want me to go to Stanford? I need to give myself the mission statement of like, the importance of going to college, because I need to convince myself of the opportunities it will provide, or like something, the motivation. I need to give myself the motivation. So I had that conversation with her. I got convinced about the motivation of like, you want to do this because it opens up all these doors. It's a safety net. No girl in our family has ever gone to college, blah, 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 all these things. And then I was like, okay, now I have the motivation. Now I have pretty much all the tools I need to convince myself. So now I have to do it. And what I did was I walked around Golden Gate Park in San Francisco holding my phone up to my face and talking to myself. And I still have the video on my phone. And it's pretty much just me saying, Miriam, you're going to go to Stanford. You're going to Stanford for these reasons, you know? And I'm just like convincing myself, you can do it. You will do it, you know? Yeah. Just like literally like you have to do it because of these reasons. And I created on my computer screen I'm very into like motivational stuff, you know? So I used to all the time create desktop screens, or like motivational desktop screens. And so I had all these reasons, like 4B for my sister Batsheva, you know, like to help women's rights, like little pop-ups of like words of reasons why I want to be successful. And I saw that every day on my computer, and it was just like motivation for me to do this. And so yeah, creating that video was me really deciding that this is happening. And then I just set a list of objectives of like, I broke it down. So I need to get at least a 31 on my ACTs, because that's what Stanford's minimum is. I need to get like recs from Stanford professors, because connections matter, you know? And that was pretty much all I can do, like at that time, I think. And that was like a lot for me. Write my college essay. Like I just like wrote it all down and just set up my schedule, just studying at these times, working on my essay at this time, and just putting in the work, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So the steps basically are, number 1, decide that you're going to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Convince yourself to believe in yourself. And you do that by figuring out all the reasons that can essentially evidence for why you should believe in yourself and do a certain thing. And then once you've convinced yourself that you can do it, once you have sold yourself on the goal / outcome that you want to accomplish, then it's basically a matter of breaking it down into like the ladder. Like here are all the steps that I have to do, and then executing upon those in a certain time frame. And then the rest of it is just like, you know, there's a bit of luck involved in there, right?
Yeah. 100%. But at least I always knew that I gave it my all. And if I didn't get in, I had backup plans. Like I was preparing for all scenarios. So yeah, so I wasn't like, at least I knew that I kept my promise to my mom, and I kept my promise to myself at that point too. And if I didn't get in, it's their loss at that point, you know? And I even have the video of me looking at my acceptance letter. And in the video, I say, if I don't get into Stanford, it's their loss because I'm going to be doing great things. And then I open up the video. Obviously, I was saying that because I was scared. I didn't know if I was going to get in. And my brother was videoing me, and I didn't want to be, like, sad, you know?
Yeah.
But then I got in, so it was all good. But I said that because I did mean it at the end of the day, you know? Yeah. Like, it's their loss. As long as we try our best and it doesn't happen, then we tried our best. That's all we can ask for, is just to do our best at the end of the day. And it's like, it's that, you know, that pushes me, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's also a reframing of failure, right? It's like if you don't end up achieving your goal or what you set out to do, it's only a failure if you look back and regret that you didn't give it your all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like now my writing skills are better from that. Studying for that ACT, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and so I did gain, no matter what. Even if we don't hit the success marker that we think we need to hit, I am sure we learned so much along the way. And it will apply to our lives in so many other aspects too, I think. So like it's redefining that failure to a different kind of success.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think of different things, how that even applies like personally, right? As you like go through life and like relationships that fail and like other things that just don't work out the way you did. It's like, so long as I was my authentic self and I put myself out there for the goal, for the relationship, for the, you know, whatever else it is that you want to achieve, to always go back and think like, what did I learn from this? How am I a better person as a result?
Exactly.
So another part of learning your authentic self was really discovering your sexuality, which I'm assuming is like big no-no, you know, in your Orthodox community. So it's like, tell me about the process of discovering like who you are and just like accepting your own sexuality.
Yes. So I guess, so it's in the beginning when I was younger, I can start from around then. I was always just like magnetized towards women in the sense that I just wanted to touch boobs. Like that was like a thing about me. I just always wanted to touch them. Yeah. And it was very platonic. It was like a platonic curiosity that I had. And I even remember like being 10 years old and like my friend saying, she's like, I'll pretend to be the boyfriend and you pretend to be the girlfriend and you just like sit on top of me and touch my boobs. And I was like, okay, this sounds so much fun, you know? And it wasn't even like at 10 years old, it wasn't really sexual, but we just both wanted to do that. And so I had these experiences and I never really thought about it as a kid because, one, I didn't even know what a lesbian was. So I didn't even know that two girls can be kissing. Like that was never something I was taught. It was never something that I've seen growing up. So I just didn't know it existed. And then as I got older, like I was 12 and I knew what being gay was at that point, it was just so stigmatized, so terrible. And there's even a norm in the community that if let's say like this applies to men because being lesbian in the community just like really just barely existed at all. But if let's say a guy, like people knew that this person's gay just by the sound of his voice or the way he talks or things like that, it was just accepted in the community that this is what God wanted for this person and he's still going to marry a woman. And that's that, you know, sucks for him, but they're still going to have a family. And so that was kind of like the expected norm in the community of people. And when I was in high school, I remember I had a Jewish law class, and I remember asking my professor or my teacher, somehow it came up about like being lesbian, if that's like a thing. And the rabbi said that is just ideas of outer society, like the outside world and their influence, but it's impossible for two women to ever have sexual relations together, and it's all just made up in your head. And it just can't exist. So that's what we learned growing up. And so it's funny now because technically that means it's not a sin. And because that's what we learned in school, that only men can waste sperm, and that's why two men can't be together because they can't be wasting sperm with each other. And so for two girls, there's no sperm involved, and so that's why like sex doesn't exist, and they're not technically doing anything wrong if there is lesbian sex, which is a fun fact. But that was me growing up, and then I had this experience when I was 13. My best friend, she spread a rumor about me that I was a lesbian, and I had a birthday party like that weekend, and then nobody came to my birthday party because their moms didn't want them to be friends with a lesbian. And so I was super sad. I like climbed a tree. I fell asleep on a tree. That's what I did when I was sad. And then I decided like maybe they know something about me that I don't. I went on my iPod and I Googled lesbian porn, and I watched lesbian porn, and I got turned on by it. And then I was like, what's happening here? You know, maybe they know something about me that I don't. And so that happened, and then just like 3 days later, me and that friend made up, and we all moved on from the situation because we were like 13-year-old girls. And I just really never thought back on it, like, which sounds so crazy, but I just didn't think about it again. I didn't think about my sexuality. I didn't watch lesbian porn again. It just was something that to me from that experience was so evil and so wrong to like be a lesbian that I didn't want to think about myself in that way. And so I didn't until I moved to San Francisco. And moving there, being in San Francisco, the day I arrived was actually Pride Festival. And so I was living on Market Street when I came there. And so that was where people walked down on, like, during the Pride. And so I remember looking out my window and just seeing nude women and just, like, I'm like, where am I, you know? Like, this is crazy, just coming from where I came from. And so, yeah, I guess after, like, maybe it was only once I was 18 that I really admitted to myself that I was bisexual. But it was, when I said it to myself, I was like, I felt very comfortable about it. And it was just because of all the exposure I had from my friends in San Francisco. Like, they're all bisexual. Everybody was gay, you know, that was just the norm. And so I was very comfortable saying that. But I became comfortable outside with saying, like, I'm bisexual once I had my first kiss. Like, that was okay. Everything was good. But it took me a long time to accept it in a romantic, like, relationship too, I would say, with partners that I've had in the past.
And you mean, like, sexually, would you still feel guilty or?
Yeah, so that's something. So I overcame kind of accepting my sexuality, but I learned about this term called internalized homophobia, and that's something that took me an even longer time to overcome. And I would say that was because of just my upbringing, of just what it meant to, I think, be in a sexual relationship and like be a good partner, or I don't know, all these things, what that meant. To me, that didn't fit into the definition of a queer relationship. And so that took a really long time for me to overcome that, I would say, too. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you ultimately release that guilt and that shame?
So pretty much I would just get guilty from like sleeping with girls. That was what it was. And the way I got over it was by seeing a sex therapist, which is a fun fact about me. And I actually like really had struggled like for a long time with having orgasms too. So this sex therapist pretty much helped me overcome those like all of my sexual issues that I had just from, I guess, my community. I don't know, but yeah. So.
And so, I mean, I think that I know there's more about like you and just, it almost feels like you're experimenting, with your life, which is something that I do a lot. I'm like, I just iterate, I try out different like company ideas, different types of relationships, like learning more and more about what I like. And as you do that, you discover more freedoms and you discover things like that you thought were wrong are not actually wrong.
Right.
It's just like this. There's so many, I keep breaking through like so many freedoms that I'm just like, oh wait, I'm not supposed to be ashamed of this. Oh wait, I'm not supposed to be ashamed of this. I know something that you've done recently is that you have tested not wearing makeup for months, right?
Yeah.
What triggered that experiment and how have you found it?
Yeah, I guess just I've been wearing a lot of makeup. I mean, so we did filming for season 2, and so we have a hair and makeup person, and so it's amazing. I get to wake up in the morning, and it literally takes them 15 minutes, so it's not even like a big time commitment for me. And I just sit in a chair, and they do my hair and makeup, and I'm like, I look amazing, beautiful, this is great. And then we just go, like, so I do my day and things like that. But now after that, of just me wearing hair and makeup like every single day for the show, I didn't want to be doing that for myself. And I kind of just wanted a break to reestablish my relationship with my natural beauty in my face. So that's one reason why, just because I've been wearing so much makeup. And then another reason is because I'm doing kind of this social experiment with myself. And I decided I want to apply male beauty norms to myself. And so this is a real reason why too. So I haven't been shaving anything. I'm very hairy right now, the hairiest I've ever been, and it's starting to make me feel a little uncomfortable. It didn't make me feel uncomfortable until like the past 2 weeks, but now I hit a point where like my vagina is just a little too long, like it's like I want to touch it, like this is uncomfortable. I just want to play with it, so it's really nasty, but yeah. I'm getting uncomfortable, but I'm sticking with it. We'll see how much longer I can last, but I'm just applying male beauty norms to myself because men, they don't have to shave their armpits, they don't put makeup on, it's very simple. It's very easy. They don't have to spend money on these things either. And so I'm paying attention to that too. Like how much money, I spent a lot of money on laser hair removal. That's what I did, and so I don't want to do that anymore. So I'm just trying this out. This is like kind of a social experiment to see how comfortable I am coming on podcasts without wearing makeup, it feels a little uncomfortable, but I would say that this one instance that stands out to me. I was speaking at this like Woman of Silicon Valley tech conference in San Francisco, and this was like early on in me not wearing makeup. Like this happened a month and a half ago, and I just felt uncomfortable. I just wanted to wear mascara because I was like speaking on a stage. I was like at least mascara, but I didn't do it because I also didn't own anything. That was another thing. I got rid of all my makeup, so I didn't have any makeup with me where I was living. And so I went to this conference, and then somebody came up to me, and they're like, by the way, like, I love your makeup. Like, what do you do? It's so natural and pretty. I'm like, thank you. They're like, what's that? What's your eyeshadow? I'm like, I'm not wearing any. Like, it felt so good. And that in itself was like me kind of redefining a beauty standard, because this person liked how I presented, liked my makeup routine, but I wasn't wearing any. And if more and more women stopped wearing makeup, that would become the new beauty standard. And so having this person say that to me felt so good, because it kind of made me feel like I wasn't defying a norm anymore. And that's what's so hard for the most part. It's defying norms, and instead of me just living and just not having to wear makeup. Like when men don't wear makeup, they're not defying a norm, they're just living the norm. And that's so easy. And so for us, for women, if we decide to not wear makeup, that's us going against something. That takes energy to go against something, exactly. You know? And it sucks, but it's the case. And so by her saying that, it kind of took that weight of defying off of my shoulders, because I kind of felt like I fit in anyways, even though I was living my authentic truth.
Yeah.
And so I guess the message here is a little bit is just going against defying those norms anyways, and soon it will become the norm itself. And you'd be surprised by what people actually don't think is such a big deal, too.
I mean, I remember reading this quote, and it's not exact, but it's basically like the male advantage is being able to essentially do things and not be labeled as selfish or rebellious.
Yes.
Right? To take action, to prioritize himself, to just be.
Yeah.
And women who do the same, it's like, oh, she's rebelling. Oh,
right.
She's like, defying things.
Right.
And yeah, it's like, I choose to be single. Oh, that's such a defiance of norms. Like, I choose to like freeze my eggs. Oh, like she's trying to be independent. It's like, no,
right.
I'm just living my life. And yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And so, like going forward, and like, what are some other norms that you feel like need to change?
So many.
I know. Just like what may be top of mind for you as you think about other social experiments that you might conduct.
So I think, like top of mind for me, my lived experience is being a woman. And so a lot of what I care about are norms that are placed on women. And I've thought about a couple of things a lot. So I'll say two things. So one is like presentation. I think that from my experience, I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be a woman and what that looks like. And I have a friend, for example, who's now non-binary, and they said, and they're female, so they grew up being a woman, and so they said that they decided to be non-binary because they just didn't want to just subscribe to all the rules of what it means to be a woman, and it's just easier for them to say non-binary and then just wear what they want to wear, and they're no longer in the category of woman and what that means. And I get that. I'm like, that makes, like, good for you. That's great. Like, I'm so happy for you. And even for me, like, I understand that. I don't want to, like, subscribe to all the things of what it means to be a woman either. But the difference with me is that I want to change that. I want to still be a woman, and I'm proud to be a woman, and I just want to redefine those norms. And I want to have hairy legs and say that I'm a sexy woman, and, like, that's fine. And so I guess that's one thing that I want just, like, to change the norm, is that women should just represent themselves the way that they truly want to be represented outside of what they think a woman should look like more. I think that would be really great, whether that means wearing tighter clothes, whether that means wearing baggier clothes, whether that means cutting your hair or growing it out, Like, I think we should do what feels right to ourselves, because at the end of the day, we know what that is.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I think women really need to learn how to trust themselves and trust their gut. Like, we know what we want. I think, and we have good advice for other people and for ourselves. We just need to start listening to it. I think women should just be challenging themselves more and more and proving themselves wrong and listening to themselves, because at the end of the day, we can do anything, and we should be doing what we think we should be doing.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's so important. And also, like, kudos to you for, like, doing all the work and discovering all of this at a very young age, right? And I think that's, like, I've spent also so much time just unraveling in my mind, like, what are the voices that belong to me and what are the voices that do not? And I still find myself, like, in little things tripping up with, like, caring about societal norms, where I'm like, wait a minute, how did this happen? Like, even in relationships, right? Like, I've had the experience of basically being asked about how many sexual partners I've had, and then me having to say it, and then being afraid to talk about my sexual history, because there's still that internalized belief of, like, oh, if a woman has had more sexual partners, it means she's a slut.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore she's not wife material.
Right.
And therefore she can't be trusted, or she's dirty. And I was like, everything about the brand that I'm building and myself and what I advocate for, which is women being true to themselves.
Right.
And yet, at the same time, how did I end up caring about this man's opinion that ultimately diminishes me or judges me for just living the life that I wanted to live.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, I think it's this constant checking yourself and being like, am I being true to myself? Am I really like sticking up for what I believe in and not allowing anyone else to really define what it means to be the best version of you?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. Any last pieces of advice that you would give in terms of just like thinking about how to like bite off more than you can chew, how to really like get to that next level in your life, especially for women who might feel like a little bit stuck?
Yeah. So I don't think it's easy, and I think we have to accept that. I think that's part one. To understand that our society has brainwashed us for the most part and convinced us that we can do less than we think we can, or that we can do less than we think we can do, or more.
Yeah. That we are only able
capable
to
do less than we can do.
Yeah.
And so I think one, just accepting that this is a reality, but not letting it be our reality, you know? And so to do that, I would start small, and I think that's the easiest thing to do. If let's say somebody has this big idea, you know, break it down. That's step one. Break down big, like what makes a math problem hard is that there's just so many plus and minuses at the end of the equation, right? But at the end of the day, it's just plus and minuses, and we can, if we break big problems down, they're possible. So I would just say, step it out, pace it out. Let's say you want to start a business. Let's say you want to build a website. Just see what you need to actually do it. It doesn't mean you actually have to do it, but just see what does it take to start this thing? What does it take to do this thing? And then decide if you want to start with one of those steps and take it from there. Mm-hmm. So I would just say break down big problems and see that they're actually not as scary as you think they are. Mm. So get over of the idea of things and actually look at it logically and see if it's possible. I would say that's a big part.
Yeah, and I think that's really great advice, because then it's like you're not prematurely limiting yourself because the weight of what you want to achieve feels so heavy, and you're like, oh, and then you convince yourself out of it, right? Like it's so big and I'm only, this small, therefore like I don't have what it takes. And that is ultimately the easy route to be like, well, I can't do it.
Yeah. And for example, like I just started a podcast. I haven't released anything yet, but I did exactly that. Like the idea of a podcast sounds so intimidating. Like this setup is so incredible, and I literally just got a microphone that I've been carrying around with me and doing recordings in very random places. And so like for me, what I did was I decided one night, like, what do I need to start this? And I saw all I need is a microphone. Actually, I don't even need to know how to edit. I don't need to know what the name of the podcast is going to be. I don't need to know what the podcast will be about. All I want to do to get this started is to have conversations with people. I can do that, right? And so I'm journaling this out at 11 p.m. thinking like, I can do this. All I need is a microphone. And then I see online I can rent microphones for free at Stanford. And so I just rented one. I rented a microphone, and I had this one kid in my dorm who I just wanted to talk to on the podcast, and we did it. I got my first podcast recording. Then I did the second when another professor who was so cool to me, I was like, can I talk to you? I just brought the microphone with me to his office. And so then eventually the name came to me after just doing this after a while. It's called Faking It. Just like fake it till you make it, not faking orgasms. But yeah, and I think that's just like an example of what you can do. Now I have a podcast, like just what do you need? What do you actually need to get this started? And then just do it. And just being okay with that uncertainty. That's where like being comfortable with uncomfortable comes in. Just being okay not having the answers. Looking at fear in a way that's more exciting than scary. That's another way to go about this too. Like embracing fear, embracing uncertainty, being like, this is where I learned. That's good. I want to be learning. When I don't know something and then I do, I just learned. That's great, And so like, just like that mindset shift is super important.
Like getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Last question for you.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a bad bitch?
Okay, to be a bad bitch means to have sex with women and no, sorry, that's for me. That's my bad bitch. But I would say it is amazing. Everybody should try it. Really, at least once. And so, but other than that, being a bad bitch means saying no when you want to say no, saying yes when you want to say yes, and taking risks always, and trusting yourself. just trusting yourself, loving yourself when you don't want to love yourself. That's what it means to be a bad bitch.
Awesome. I mean, loving yourself, that's the greatest gift and the greatest return on investment at the end of the day.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, Miriam, thank you so much for sharing your story and your advice and just being you and like continuing to push those norms and ultimately turning them into, you know, the norms that we actually want to live by.
Thank you. Yeah, no, super awesome.